Hello, headphone mixers. My name is Paul Third, and that gentleman sat across from me virtually is Emrah Celik, an award-winning mix and mastering engineer with over 3 billion streams to his name, with over 90% of those streams coming from mixing on headphones. Now, this week we have decided to go a little bit controversial because we do feel that there are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of bad advice online, and a lot of that bad advice has been coming from YouTubers. Would you believe it? YouTubers giving bad advice about audio. Who would have thunk it? Now, we are not going to name and shame because we don't want it to be that type of video. For me and Emrah, it's not about the YouTube clout. It's about just making sure that the correct information is out there so people aren't being misled, and then with that information making the wrong decisions and the wrong purchases. We just want to basically take the time to correct. How many have we got, Emrah? 8. Is it 8 points? I've got 6 on my phone. I think you've got 2 extra as well that you've seen quite recently. So we've got so we've got 8 points, and let's just get straight into it. So this is all kind of what we feel is bad, misleading information that we found by YouTubers in the audio field talking about mixing on headphones. So let's get straight into it. Okay, number 1. Low impedance headphones need less power than high impedance. Now, the reason for this misconception is kind of down to a few manufacturers that sell headphones in, various, different impedances. Emrah, could you go a little bit more into this?
Yeah, sure. I think the whole belief is coming from 2 companies. I'm going to name them, Bear Dynamic and Sennheiser. Because they still producing the same headphones that they produced 20, 30 years ago. And those days, it was making sense back in days. But right now, the technology is improving and we got less ohms and more sensitivity. Low impedance headphones need less power, right? Yep. That's the myth. So that's not how power works, bro. Power is, in headphones, voltage times current, right?
Yep.
And the lower the impedance, the more current you have to pull.
Correct.
And higher the impedance, you need more voltage.
Yep.
The real factor is sensitivity that everybody misses. If you have 32 ohms, which is low ohm at this days, considering it low ohms, can be harder to drive than a 300 ohm if the sensitivity is low on 32 ohms. So impedance changes how you deliver the power, not how much you need, right? You don't know how much power you're going to need just because looking by the numbers, 32 ohms, I can drive it easily. That means that you're going to drive 8 ohms headphones even easier. Like a phone can drive it, but that's not the fact.
Yeah.
Because you lower the ohms, the more current you need. There is no free lunch, right? It's like balance. You lower the ohm, the current goes up. If you higher the ohm, you're gonna need more power or voltage. Sorry. So that's the thing. So we have seen a lot of headphones that is really high on sensitivity with higher ohms. I have a few pairs here. I have 60 pairs of headphones that I have tested with even shitty stuff, shitty amps. Some of them you can drive. If you look at the paper, the specs, then we could easily say that the X1, topping the X1, could easily drive an under nanos. But that's not the case. Yeah, you get higher volumes, but you increase the distortion because it's current limited.
Correct.
That's a big misconception and misbelief, and that's past, that's 20 years ago.
Yep.
Not today.
No. And I think a very important distinction to make, as I've been saying to so many people in comments and also on the Discord, is that distinction between voltage and current. And Emrah, you made a very good comment, I think it was maybe 2-3 videos ago, and it was talking about the voltage that you need to drive most high impedance headphones. And voltage is the thing that's not an issue. You have so many audio interfaces nowadays that carry a ton of voltage that can easily power like most 300, 600 ohm. And, if we put it into physical practice, the reason that me and Emrah could say all this, because it's all good saying blah, 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 on Piper and Ohm's law and blah, blah, blah. We have had, physical experience driving headphones with multiple interfaces and multiple different amps. And the hardest to drive headphones in our collections are low ohm planars. And the thing you need to know about planars are that most planars are going to be very low ohm. Most of the Headphones that you're going to find on the market these days, 14, 16 ohm, Dan Clark, 14, 16 ohm. Odysseys are normally low ohm, under like 20 ohm. And yes, you do get the odd headphone like the Headphone Susvara and the HE6 SE version 2, which is arguably the most hungry headphone on the market. Somebody else said to me the Tungsten is meant to be harder to drive, but you've got Cosmo as well. I think Cosmo is 32 ohm or something like that. Again, it's low ohm, isn't it? The Moondrop Cosmo. And it is ridiculously...
It's 15 ohms.
15 ohm, right? So there you go, right? Yeah. Cosmo will make amps shut down. Like Emrah's had expensive amps shut down with Cosmo. And again, we're talking 15 ohm. Planars always require more current, right, than a dynamic driver. So if you're talking like low ohm, you have to be very, very, very aware of current, and you have to understand how current limited your amps are. Nearly all audio interfaces are massively current limited. USB DAC amps, current limited. Battery powered DAC amps like your Chord Mojo 2, even the FIO, the QX13 that we're using just now, that'll go from 900 milliwatts at 32 ohm balanced and then cut all the way down to 480 milliwatts at 16 ohm. So it's losing half its power because it can only provide so much current. So if you are using planars that require a lot of current, then you need a lot of headroom, which means that you need an amp that can deliver ample current, which is why the HE6 SE version 2 and Headphone Susvara famously will make even, my old topping A90 discrete fall at its knees trying to deliver it linearly. And that's the last thing that we'll end on in this point, is that there's two different things, right? You've got voltage, which is going to give you level, right? So just because your amp has ample voltage and you can get to the level that you require for, mixing, doesn't mean that you're going to get there linearly. And by linearly, I mean distortion, right? So without any distortion. If your amp is current limited, yes, like the Ananda Nanos with the DX1, you're going to get ample volume. Like DX1 is at 50%, and you could get Ananda Nanos to ear screaming levels with DX1 because it has the voltage, but because it's lacking the current, it's not got the headroom, it's not got enough current available, you're then going to hear distortion. The low end is going to distort, your transients are going to be shaved off. So yes, the whole misconception that many YouTubers have made that high ohm headphones are way, way harder to drive than low ohm headphones is incorrect. So yes, that's a lot of good information that we've got in that first one there. So number 2, everybody's going to know who this is, but we're not naming names. Number 2, you don't need a headphone amp. MacBook Pro is enough. Now, to be honest with you, right, I'm quite glad that we've finished on that point, because we've basically, for number 2, we've just basically explained why a MacBook Pro can't. But I'll explain it to you again. Yes, a MacBook Pro for a laptop headphone amp, yeah, it's pretty powerful. It's decent. It could go down to 100 milliwatts at 16 ohm. But again, it's current limited. So even, for example, with the Kiwi Ears Altruva, that's 50 milliwatts at 32 ohms, that is all that the MacBook Pro amp provides. So at 32 ohms, 50 milliwatts. You're not going to get change out of any planar, because most planars are going to need more. Again, one of the probably the most sensitive planars that you'll find that I've found is actually the Aria Organic. The Headphone Aria Organic was pretty easy to drive. MacBook Pro still can't do it linearly. It shaves off the transients. So if we take what we've just said about, checking headphone sensitivity, and again, understanding the difference between voltage and current, then yes, MacBook Pro will get a lot of headphones loud, but it doesn't get every headphone loud. there's a headphone that's a way to come out from Jade Audio, the JT7, and the MacBook Pro doesn't even get to like 75 dB. Like, it's genuinely like it doesn't have any power to get it there. And there's lots of headphones that it's done that with. I remember the Audio Technica R70XA. It didn't have the power to be able to get it to loud levels. It will get a lot of headphones to loud levels, and I'll get some of them, to do it relatively linearly. But to be honest with you, it's decent. It's decent for a laptop headphone amp. I would argue it's arguably one of the best headphone amps in a laptop. But that's as far as it goes. Emrah, you got anything to say on that misconception?
You need headphone amp.
That's it.
That's what I'm going to tell. Now, that's easy. So the thing is, it's been over 20 years for me. I have been working with headphones and doing professional work, and I have shitloads of headphones everywhere. Like every drawer I draw, there's a headphone that I left 5 years ago or something. And maybe at, like 20, 30 different amps and shit. As someone who has been working with headphones for years and just released a song yesterday who got like in 24 hours got 3.5 million streams. I'm telling you, just don't listen anybody who has never worked on headphones professionally. That's not the technical part. That's an advice from and as someone, I believe I'm a headphone expert. Yeah, you get sound from MacBook I have here. I've been testing it with every headphone that I have. Just plug in there and try to listen. Yeah, you get the sound, but not accuracy. Not really. That's a simple thing. Because MacBooks, it's the world best headphone output from a laptop.
I would agree, yeah, definitely.
It measures great, it's perfect. But if you're gonna use a low ohm headphones with really high sensitivity, like Audio Technica M50X, you don't need it. AKG 371, you don't need it. But the moment you get into professional or high-end stuff, that you have to use headphone amp. So when you drive something demanding, like planar magnetic or like high ohm headphones, you're gonna get sound, a level of sound, but not the accuracy or power. You won't feel the punch and bass and stuff like that, because you're just raving the headphones or the MacBook amp like through a straw. Like I said, like you have 6-7 gears in your car and you're just not switching from more than 3 gears, right?
Yeah.
Gear 3. 1, 2, 3, and there's no, you just raving the amp. Listen to me. You need headphone amp if you are into mixing on headphones.
Yep. And another point I'll make that somebody made on the Discord, and this I will end this one, is that they've been using Slate VSX for years and years, and on the road they were always using their MacBook Pro, and they recently got the FIO QX13, and he commented, he was like, I cannot believe the difference that I got with Slate VSX. I always thought Slate VSX was super easy to drive, and like do it linearly, no distortion, MacBook Pro perfect. He went, I just played it through this tiny little DAC amp, and I was like amazed at the detail that I was missing. And that was one of the reasons why he kind of put VSX to the side and he thought these headphones are absolutely shit, because the amp was not delivering the headroom needed to give you the full potential of the headphones. And by full potential, we mean full headroom. We mean full microdynamics. We mean your bass not being shaved off. Clean, linear, low end. Especially with Slate VSX, because you've got to remember that you've got, this is one thing I say to everybody, right? You've got your rate, like your headphone sensitivity, right? And then you've got the milliwatts that you would need to get to a certain level. And for us, it's normally, say, 110 dB SPL peak. Right? If you go 110 dB, watch that video and you'll realise why you're being an idiot right now, okay? Just watch it and you'll understand why 110 dB SPL peak is like, normally it's like 85 dBA, right, on average. Now, you will get a certain amount of power that will power that without any EQ. Now, what happens is when you then add in a bass boost, you then multiply the power needed because low end is so hard to drive, right? So if you're adding a 3, especially a 6, a 5 or 6 dB boost, you might need to multiply the power by 2, 3, 4 times dependent on the bass boost. So something that starts off as 200 milliwatt might end up at 400, 500 milliwatt. And then you've got to think about that's the max power you'd need, and then add a little bit of headroom on top just to make sure that the amp can do so without any distortion. So you need a lot more power than you think, especially when you're EQing. And again, if we think about Slate VSX, what are the room sims doing? They're adding a shit ton of bass. You listen to the club, what's it doing? It's adding a shit ton of bass. So to get the best out of Slate VSX, yes, you should be using an amp. You don't need to go with the most expensive amp. I remember Emrah said to me that DX1 from Topping.
DX1 is good enough.
99 quid. You can even get it cheaper on some sales, maybe 70 quid. It's cheap and it does the job. You don't need to go out spending loads of money, but just be aware that the MacBook Pro hasn't got the full power potential to be able to drive the Slate VSX. So yeah, it's a misconception, right? It's decent at what it does. It will, drive some headphones linearly without any issue. But yeah, you need an amp, right? If you're in the world of planars, get a fucking amp. Okay. So
yeah, that's the point.
That's it. Move on. Okay, so number 2's done. Okay, number 3. We've seen this on quite a few. Now, it's more of an audiophile thing, but there has been some people that say they mix on headphones. And this is one thing about YouTubers, is that many of them make out they actually mix on headphones to sell headphones to people because they've been paid to review them. And by the way, we've never been paid to review any headphone. And they say this quite a lot. And this is when me and Emrah know that you don't mix professionally on headphones. As number 3, you don't need to EQ headphones. That's a dead giveaway. If you ever want to know if somebody does mix professionally on headphones and they say, yeah, I don't EQ my headphones, most likely they don't mix on headphones. Of course you need to EQ your headphones, because guess what? Headphones, unfortunately, all have kind of hi-fi stock tunings, right? We've talked about this many, many, many times. We don't need to go into it in full detail. Emrah, could you maybe give people a general gist for somebody that hasn't watched our previous videos? Again, watch the videos that we do have. I'll leave a link in the description for those that are relative to this discussion. But general, Emrah, why should you be EQing your headphones?
I have countless number of headphones in my room, in my house, in everywhere, even in my car. Somewhere I can find stuff, when I dig deeper. Just tell me how many headphones you tried. Like you tried maybe 30 headphones, or we were just in the Can Jam, right? Yep. We went all the stands. How many of them was 100% accurate? And how many of them sounded shit, thin, but the moment you EQ them, they became a monster.
Yep.
You are a living legend. That is, the witnesses these things, right?
Yeah.
You remember I was telling you, you have to EQ. And you see the true power of the headphones, right?
Yeah.
When you got the first Sundara.
Yeah, I mean, that was a long, long time ago. But I remember...
A long time ago.
Yeah, and I remember...
And it changed your life, right? It changed the way you look at the headphones.
Yeah, I think it was funny because obviously you've got Harman and stuff like that. And, obviously Emrah, at that time we were EQing a lot to Harman. And, it just really showed me how a headphone can tonally sound very akin to speakers, and straight away I noticed that for the first time ever my counter translation was really good to speakers. And again, we got into the whole crossfeed thing after that with the Sundaras, but in terms of EQ, the EQ was the thing that allowed me to make accurate mixing decisions. And I remember before I got into all of it, and Emrah started teaching me about all these things 5-6 years ago. Well, it was ages ago now, but it was amazing how I was mixing on Bose. And I remember my mixes, because they were really muddy sounding headphones, the QC, I can't remember what the word, QC something, Comfort. I remember they used to be really muddy, so my counter translation was I used to always make my mixes sound too thin. And then I remember I would send them to mastering engineers. I'd be like, oh, bro, like, this sounds too warm. It's too warm. Like, what have you done? And he's like, I remember the master, Marcel at the time, he was like, yeah, mate, it's just what it needs, mate. I was very politely, I was like, I was listening to, like, you know, kind of different, like, you know, kind of genre-specific playlists on Spotify, and that's just kind of the tonality that they had. Basically, he didn't have, he was very polite, and he didn't want to say, yeah, bro, your mix is shit, and it doesn't translate. So I've had to EQ the fuck out of it to get it to translate. But me and the bosses, I was like, this sounds terrible. And again, I've spoke about it with the Bayer Dynamics, the amount of times I've had Bayer Dynamic mixes, and I've listened to them on the Bayers, and I've been like, yeah, this sounds great. And then you stick them on the speakers, you stick them on other headphones, and there's like no translation. And I genuinely thought that the Dan Clark No RX was going to be the only headphone that didn't need EQ. And guess what? Fucking 5 bands later, here I am. Because there is no perfect headphone. And I think what's very important as well is that if you've got multiple headphones, maybe 2-3 headphones, fucking the amount of headphones me and Emrah have, it's very important to have a consistent sound. So the last thing you want to do is to have a sound that's coming out of speakers, then have a completely different sound in your headphones, then another completely different sound in another pair of headphones, because what that's going to do is it's going to confuse your mixing decisions because you have no consistency. It sounds dull in these, but it sounds bright in those. And the transients are great in those, but the transients are dull in these. You're just going to be in a position where you don't make any accurate decisions and you try and average them all out when really you can just have a standard kind of tonality, which kind of, you know, is Harman as a starting point. Obviously, me and Emrah use his engineer target, and we can tweak it from there as well. But every headphone needs EQ'd. Like, most headphones don't have the bass boost required to accurately get the right tonality for mixing a low end on headphones. That's just, like, for me, like, point blank, the biggest reason. Is normally low end. But especially like if you've never heard headphones that have got like too much ear gain or they're too bright. What's going to happen if a headphone's too bright? You're going to dull it. You're going to dull it, and your mixes are then going to sound too dull. And it's the same opposite way. If you have a headphone that's too dull, your mixes are going to be bright. And many people will say, but you can learn that sound. You can learn that sound. Everybody that said that, I've heard their mixes. I've been there, I've heard other people's mixes, I've heard people trying to learn the Bayer sound, I've heard people trying to learn Sennheisers, I've heard other people trying to learn some of the Neumanns and stuff like that, and the MM500s, and I've heard the same consistent translation issues. And I think what's also important to mention is that when we speak about EQ, it is about translation. It's counter translation, that's it. You cannot fix soundstage, and you can't fix like micro details with EQ. You can make it a little bit more prominent. You can add a little bit more like pin again, 1 to 2K for some transients. You can make things a little bit brighter, 3 to 4K. You can add a bit more top end to maybe, you know, give you a little bit more. It's not even giving you more side image, but give you more top end so you hear like reverb tails a little bit more. But that's not what we do. We don't think like audiophiles. We don't go for preference. We go for accuracy, and accuracy is translation and consistent translation. Without EQ, I would not be able to get mixes approved. I've had V1s approved on headphones. Every mix that I've done in the past 5-6 years has been on headphones, and I'm doing this professionally now. I'm getting paid, and, you know, I don't know, maybe 1, 2, 3 revisions at the most. You know, I've had a few V1s accepted, and the only way I know that I could get that consistency is by getting the right EQ to get the right tonality. Because when you have that sound locked in, what it allows you to do is go to your headphones. In my studio, I can go to my headphones, I can go to the speakers, and there's no change. I know exactly if something's right. If something's too bright on the speakers, it'll sound too bright on the headphones. If something's muddy on the speakers, it'll sound muddy on the headphones. And that is the reason why we EQ, because it's all about counter translation. There is no perfect headphone on the market, and you cannot learn low end that is not there. Like, Emrah, like, think about trying to mix low end correctly on headphones, knowing that you need a 5 to 6 dB boost, like a 5 to 6 low end fucking shelf. How are you going to know to get the fucking low end right on that? It's not going to happen, is it? It's not going to happen.
Bro, like from the experience, every headphone has huge frequency deviations. And as you said, sometimes 5 to 10 dB. You know, it's maybe 10 dB bright, like ear-piercing bright, or there's no bass, like 5 dB lost on your tonality. And people think that EQ is going to color the sound. No, EQ doesn't color your sound. It corrects those flaws, so you are hearing an accurate reference. So mixing without EQing headphones is like color grading your film or photograph with a monitor which is uncalibrated.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point.
You are going to compensate everything for the display you have, not the art. To compensate everything for the art, you need the EQ. You need to know the flaws of your headphones and EQ them accordingly. So there is no perfect headphones. Even as you said, on paper, the NoRX, right? So it's like perfect.
Yeah.
You know, perfect arm and target.
Yeah.
But here you are after 5 bands, right?
5 bands, yeah.
5 bands. Yeah. So you will always EQ your headphones eventually. That's what happened with the people who try to learn their headphones. Yeah. And the moment they just EQ them, they told us, oh, I've been torturing myself for 2 years.
Yep.
And my mixes, I've been trying to learn my headphones. Here I am after 2 years with shitty mix downs, you know, shitty translation.
Yep.
And the moment they EQ by our suggestion or they learn how to EQ stuff, now their mixes translate perfectly and they share on Discord, right? We listen to them and just maybe not 100% there right now because they still learn how to use headphones to mix on them. But comparing to their previous mixes they did for 2 years ago or like before they EQ them, this is night and day difference. So you need to EQ headphones.
Absolutely. There is no way getting around it. You need to EQ them for the best translation. Right. Now, there is a number 4 here, and this ties in very well to the last point, which was EQing headphones. Now, I've heard this on 2 videos now from 2 different YouTubers, and it surprised me when I heard this. Now, again, these were audio files. These were 2 audio files. And there's this misconception, I suppose because they're not audio engineers, it makes sense. Now, there's this misconception that you can remove top end instead of a bass boost. Now, many people...
Oh, boy.
I know. Now, the reason that many people would rather take away the top end than the low end is because in their head, when you add low end in a lot of headphones, like your Sennheisers and, you know, Bear Dynamics and, you know, headphones that have got like a really big roll off and already have high distortion in the low end, when you go add in 5 to 6, 7 dB bass boost, it's going to colour the headphones and, you know, it's not going to sound very good and it's going to give you bass that you cannot trust. Which is why some people have had this misconception that, right, instead of adding the bass boost, if I take away all of the top end, then that's going to tilt the audio and then that way I'm not going to need the bass boost because it's theoretically done the opposite. So I take away top end and theoretically it's a bass boost and that way I've got now a perceived bass boost, but now I don't have the coloration of the low end. Now, the reason why that doesn't work is because we mix at a certain level. That's what me and Emrah do all the time, and we normally say, you know, 85 dBA max peak, slow, okay? Slow. And that'll normally give you max SPL transient peaks of like 110, sometimes 115 if it's a really, really, really big, you know, bass subby track. Now, if you've got your headphone at 85 dBA and then you decide I'm just going to take out a ton of top end to kind of give me a bass boost, then your level is going to go down. And to get back to 85 dBA, what you're going to have to do, you're going to then have to raise your amp gain. So theoretically, what you have just done by raising the amp gain is you have just increased the fucking low end, right? If you look on an analyzer, right, and you do the inverse of a bass boost, right, and then you increase the gain, what that's going to look like is a bass boost, right? It's not going to change. You're basically doing the exact same thing, right? If you look at a bass boost, then what does it look like? It kind of looks like you've done a high cut, right? So it doesn't change, right? Because you've done the high cut, you've reduced the SPL, and you need to bring the SPL back up, which then just makes it the exact same thing as adding a bass boost, right? There's no difference to it. It's the exact same thing. And yes, right, there's no way of getting around it. If the headphone needs a bass boost, it needs a bass boost. If it can't do it linearly, there is no way around it. You just don't boost the bass, or you only boost it a certain amount. There's no way of getting around it. That's number 4. Number 5. Okay. Some people might figure out who this is. Some people might not, because I was in a comment that we seen this one by the YouTuber. Okay, a low end roll off isn't as bad as high frequency comb filtering. Wow. Okay. Low end roll off, you do not want in any headphone. Okay, there are some headphones that have a low end roll off, like very clean, low distortion planars, where you can, add a bass boost. But in nearly all headphones, if the energy is not there to begin with, and it is physically like cut off from the headphone, by boosting that and trying to get that sub energy back, all you're going to be doing is just stressing the shit out the amp and stressing the shit out the headphone. A low end roll off is bad. You want linear bass. When it's linear bass, it's easier to boost, and you physically have the low frequencies in the headphone. So when you boost it, you actually have that low end frequency in the headphone itself. In terms of high frequency comb filtering, I know what they mean, because if you look at graphs and you look at grass measurements, you'll see, these fucking dips and resonances that you get in headphones. But this is something that you taught me a long, long time ago, Emrah, was when you look at these frequency measurements, Paul, like anything above 10k and all these big fucking squiggly lines and all these big resonances, Paul, don't worry about them as much. What's your opinion on a low end roll off isn't bad, and high frequency comb filtering is way, way, way worse for mixing on headphones?
That's the pretty much false. The low end loss removes the entire foundation of your mix, the weight, the translation, the physical energy. I never heard a decent headphone recently released has comb filtering in it. The comb filtering is actually pretty much the timing difference between left and right. In headphones, the most important part is the accuracy of the low end. So low end roll-off is bad, as you said, and you can't bring it back. And the way manufacturer add more bass is because they're creating a fake bass. They call it fake bass. The fake bass, I mean, you have 5-inch speakers. You're working with like 3.5-inch speakers. When you sit close to them, you won't hear bass, subs, right? But when you go to the corner in your room,
Bass boundary interference.
There is an incredible bass in the corner, right? So that's a fake bass. There's acoustically boosted bass, which they usually do, especially on the dynamic drivers. They use some sort of pads and different materials to boost that bass, but it is more likely a fake bass. It's not coming out of the driver itself alone. That's why we usually recommend the planar magnets. For the measurement part you ask, recently I researched about it and checked all the papers, everything I've read about the measurement rigs that we use industry standards these days is GRASS and BNK, right?
Yep.
And the accuracy of them will give you only 60 or 70% accuracy. Maybe you can share the accuracy measurement that I did, the graph.
Yeah.
The accuracy became worse and worse the more you go higher in the frequency. And they don't guarantee you the higher frequency accuracy from 10K and up. So that's why you should never try to correct those small bumps and jiggles, that look like zips and shit.
Yeah.
On the measurement. That's the measurement error. And by looking at those zippy things and calling it it's comb filtering, man, I don't know what to say. Really.
Look, at the end of the day, right, when it comes to comb filtering, right, comb filtering, if it's really bad, is something that you're going to hear very, 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 very easily. There are some headphones that, I do hear resonances in them, but that's not like comb filtering. I'm actually hearing the resonances, in the cups themselves.
Reflections.
Correct, reflections, you know what I mean? So, look, it's just something that I think many people do this where they don't really understand headphones and they just make up fucking bullshit to try and sustain an argument that, they're fucking Sennheiser headphones with the roll-off that they can't avoid, because they have, admitted that they use them and they like them, even though everybody knows that they've not got accurate bass. And basically it's their way of just trying to hide that, they are not hearing accurate low end, and accurate low end, isn't important. Of course, accurate low end is important. If you don't get your low end right in a mix, if your foundation isn't right, the rest of the mix won't sit right. That's something that Emrah, Prezi Reed, Tour Medina, all these people taught me. You need to get the low end right. If you don't get the low end right, the mix falls to shit. It's so important, especially in today's world where people have low end in their ears. Consumers have low end in their ears. You're listening to Apple AirPods now and they're fucking nearly practically to Harman. Like, people are listening to low end now. NS10 days are fucking 30 years behind us, way along in the past. So low end roll off is bad, and I get it. Sennheiser people don't want to admit that, because then they have to admit that they're trying to mix through low end that isn't accurate, that tonally isn't accurate, and distortion wise, especially with the bass boost, is going to be distorted, and you're not going to be able to trust it. So what a lot of bullshit. Yep. But some Sennheiser users will do that. Okay, number 6. Interesting, because I just mentioned AirPods. Now, this is going to be a little bit controversial. Number 6, you can mix solely on AirPods. I've seen this now in 2 videos with 2 people saying that you can mix solely on AirPods professionally. That is something that I massively disagree with. It's something that Emrah massively disagree with. We are not saying that you can't use Apple AirPods as a second reference. You can use anything as a second reference. It makes sense to check your mixes through an Apple AirPod, because again, that's what most of your consumers are listening to. However, there are many reasons why we would never recommend anybody solely mixing on Apple AirPods. And to be honest with you, there isn't really anybody solely mixing on Apple AirPods. All of these people that say that have very good speakers in their room and treated rooms, and they have headphones as well. Emrah, you can mix solely on Apple AirPods.
We really need to understand how Apple AirPod works. I have, 2 of my customers use this. These are fantastic IEMs that you can use daily, but not for professional work. And I'm going to explain why. Because these guys has adaptive EQ on them, which means based on ceiling in your ears, there's a microphone, reverse microphone, that measures the ear canal and ceiling, as well as loudness. It depends on how loud you listen. It will constantly, like 200 EQ moves per second. It's going to lift up and down, low and highs. So your low end is going to change based on the volume you use or how tight their ceiling. So the mix you did today will going to sound probably shit on the next day. That's what I had with my customers, my clients. One of them told me, the bass is not right. I'm like, why? Because I've been testing on them with different speakers, different, car test and everything. And it is fine. Because I know if the low end is right, I know that. And he was like, oh no, it's too much. I'm like, are you sure? What are you listening to? He's like, I'm using AirPods 2. Okay, I have one. Let's try. And I put my mix down and listened to it, and it sounded perfectly fine. Just perfect on them. And I was like, are you sure? It sounds perfect. He was like, yeah, I'm sure. And turns out after 2 days, back and forth, turns out we found out that we were listening in the different levels. He was listening to way lower. And adaptive EQ, which you can turn off. I wish there was an option that you can turn off adaptive EQ. Lift the bass, right? Yeah. And he was listening to bass, which I already made pretty tight and low and heavy, became more low and heavy and became boomy. Mm-hmm. And the moment I lowered the volume, I was like, aha, I understand now. I told him, just raise the volume a little bit. He was like, bum, bum, bum. He was like, oh, perfect. Now we're talking, right? So that's the issue. You can't judge mixes on these. Everybody has one. Everybody. Look around you and you're going to see people listening to music. But this is not reference. Don't take it as a reference. And mixing on AirPods is like trying to manually tune a vocal with auto-tune is activated. Mm. You see, the system keeps moving your target while you work. I tested it already. You can try it home. Just set a volume, right? You can connect it to computer, to Mac, and from your DAW, select AirPods as your main audio source, and just put different kicks, 4x4. Higher in volume, a few shots in higher in volume, a few shots in lower volume, a few shots in middle volume, and loop it. Just loop it. Then make it quick, right? Rapid fire kicks. And you're gonna hear the kick sounds shit. That's the test you have to do. And thank me later.
Yep. Okay. Now, Emrah has 2 additional ones that he added, and I have one at the very end, because I thought, know what? I'm going to actually, put myself in the ring here, because I do think there is one video that I made about mixing on headphones that I would say, because I've changed the way that I EQ headphones now and I use a certain different method now. And there was a method that I was advertising, and you could still use it if you know how to use it, and I did say that in the video, but yeah, if I was to do that again, I would have showed a better method of EQing headphones. So I'm going to put myself in the ring for YouTubers that have gave kind of misleading advice, but I'll explain more into that. Emrah, you've got 2 additional points that you'd want to add that you've seen from a few YouTube videos as well, haven't you?
Yeah, when they recommend about headphone amps and stuff like that, they told people output impedance is all that matters in amps. That's a fucking big misconception. This is fucking old belief. Output impedance matters only if your headphone impedance changes with frequency. You will probably ask, what does it mean? It means every headphone, when they measure ohms, let's say 32 ohms, it creates a variation between frequencies. Like 100 hertz, maybe 48 ohms. Very high, like 15 kilohertz, it's 20 ohms. You never know. But if a headphone measures perfectly flat, like AKG K371, or most planar magnet headphones, that means no matter which output impedance you use, it's not going to change the frequency response of your headphones. But that depends on the impedance changes with frequency. Measure it on your headphones. Actually, the old Sennheiser and Bear Dynamic headphones did that. Like they're like 600 ohms at 1 kilohertz. They like 1000 ohms at 100 hertz. That's where the output impedance matters, right? But to make sure, you just have to use the lowest possible output impedance just to make sure. But if you know your stuff, that's a bad advice. What matters is more voltage swing and current delivery, distortion, noise floor from the amp. 0.1 ohm amp means nothing if it clips at transients, right?
Yep.
It means nothing. If it doesn't have enough power and headroom and it distorts and it's limited current, limited, and there's a too much voltage swing and it's not enough, it doesn't have enough power, that your output impedance means nothing. So output impedance is all that matters in amps, is just bullshit.
No, I totally agree with you, Emrah, because look, we're not saying that output impedance isn't, important, like at all. Like obviously all of our, all the amps that we use have very low output impedances, under 1 ohm. But, at the end of the day, it's not the make or break. I think what Emrah is saying, and he's correct in saying, is that just because your headphone amp is under 1 ohm or under 2 ohm output impedance, it doesn't mean that it's a powerful amp, and it doesn't mean that it's going to act completely linearly, it's not going to deliver distortion. It's not going to run out of current headroom. Yes, many people, could argue that, if you take, a headphone amp like the Audient Evo range, they are, famously quite high. They're some of the early ones, actually, I think the early ID14 headphone amps, they have an output impedance of 50 ohm. Now, obviously, the higher the output impedance, the less current it's going to deliver as well. If you've got a lower output impedance, then you will be able to deliver more current. But just because you've got, say, 0.1 ohm output impedance doesn't mean that it's not going to be current limited. Right, again, Topping DX1 is a great example. As we said, it distorts with nano at like 50% volume. And I think it's like 0.1 ohm or 1 ohm. Again, it's perfectly low, but it's still not got the current headroom. Right, it's still not got the full power needed to drive lots and lots and lots of headphones. So I'd say where you're correct, Emrah, is that a low output impedance is preferable and it's advisable.
Yeah,
but it's not
must.
Yeah, it's not a must, and it's not a deal breaker if you understand your headphones. Yes, if you're going to be using, a Sennheiser, or you're going to be using like an Audio-Technica AT-H R70XA, then yeah, it's got variable impedance. Yeah, you're going to want to use a headphone amp that's got the lowest output impedance possible. But if you're using a planar magnetic headphone that's going to have a flat impedance response, then the output impedance isn't going to really make any difference if it's 20 ohm, 30 ohm, as long as the headphone itself can deliver the power required for the headphone, and it's got the headroom to do that linearly, including with EQ and the bass boost. And to be honest with you, if you follow our advice on getting the right DACs and amps and DAC amps, you're never going to need to worry about output impedance, because all the topping stuff all has an output impedance of under 1 ohm anyway. But again, that's not what we look at. It's the power that we look at and how cleanly it does it, noise floor, blah. So yeah, that's another point, Emrah. There was another one I think you said you had as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Let me tell you something. High impedance headphones sound better. How about that?
I've heard that on a few videos. I have actually.
Yeah, and people think that impedance is quality. No, it isn't. It's just an electrical characteristic of the unit that you use. So I understand this myth. It came from the old studios where high impedance headphones avoided because of the hiss with noisy gear, and the sound engineers thought that they sounded cleaner. They heard less noise and stuff like that, right? But today's amps are quiet.
They are very quiet. Very quiet.
And modern 32 ohms, let's say, headphones can sound just as good or better. I mean, everything we think that sounds fucking good, probably low ohm, right? Mm-hmm. I have really barely have a high ohm headphones. Actually, the ohm numbers doesn't define the sound. It's about the driver design, right? The driver design does define the sound.
Yep.
That's why I'm just going to cut this short. The low impedance planar can outperform, let's say, 600 ohm classic in any detail, any distortion, anything. Just case closed, bro. We don't have to talk about it. So that's an old fucking belief. Just skip.
Correct.
Yeah.
Totally. Honestly, the best headphones that I've ever heard have all been low ohm. But again, it's not that it's low ohm. It's the design of the headphone. It's the quality of the driver, right? It's not the impedance. I don't look at a headphone and go, I'm not going to try. That's 300 ohms. Again, for example, VRAM 1s. VRAM 1s are 8 fucking ohms. Get a good EQ on them. Some great. Some great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fucking ridiculous. Okay. So we're going to finish on bashing a video that I did. And again, I do believe it's important that we always correct ourselves wherever possible, because I've made a lot of videos on headphones. Now, I'm kind of like doing this approach that I made in a video is still okay, but what I didn't do was kind of tell people the pitfalls around it, which is kind of, for me, misled a few people. So I made a video talking about EQing headphones and using auto EQ as a good method for EQing headphones. Now, I was advising auto EQ because it's free, and again, it's got all the databases for all the headphones. You can get different targets. You can EQ your headphones to Harman, and voila. Now, I thought it was going to be just as easy as saying, look, just use the least amount of bands possible, because if you use the least amount of bands possible, then you're going to probably run into not as many errors. However, what I didn't really kind of cater and factor for was that sometimes what auto EQ algorithms can do is try and perfect to the target and prioritize things that don't really need EQ'd. And what you could do is, if you can get maybe too much in a place where you're like, well, Paul says you should only use a minimum of like 5-6 bands. And I'm like, I'm at 7 already. And then you almost get to a point where you're like, okay, I'll remove that one. And, the auto EQ algorithm is still suggesting you, to boost like 7 dB with a Q of 5, this kind of tight notch that you don't really need. And it's missing out something really fundamental that you do need to EQ. What I should have done at the time was said to people, look, auto EQ is decent if you're looking for a quick fix, but you understand how to set the parameters in a set way where it's going to give you the right adjustments. So if I was using an auto EQ algorithm today, I'd have the Q set max to about 3. I wouldn't allow it to do any narrower than 3. And I'd set the frequency range probably to go from like 20 to, I don't know, maybe 8, 10 kilohertz or something like that, just so it's prioritizing the things that I need it to prioritize. But they can be quite finicky, and again, I think they can lead people sometimes down the wrong path where they end up over-perfecting their EQs. I think that's sometimes what I've seen with auto EQs, is that because it only sees the target and it needs to hit the target, it kind of over-perfects things and it doesn't really care about how it does it. So what I have been doing for the longest time now is I manually EQ my headphones now. So I use Squiglink. So I'll leave a link in the description. And you'll notice that when we do our videos, we always use Squiglink graphs. And a lot of times we'll, use like kind of the EQ graphs that we've used, because you can layer them on top of each other. The reason that I do manual EQs is because it means that I'm in full control of every move I make, and I can see each move individually in real time, how it changes. So again, it could be a case of going, right, I maybe want to bring down the ear gain or add the ear gain. Again, if it's a MM500, I'm thinking about, right, that's the only section that I want to take down, and I'm going to focus on that, and I'm going to manually just focus on that. And I normally find that when you do it manually and you're not using auto EQ algorithms, you get a better correction at the end of the day. You're not being misled, and you're only EQing and correcting the things that need corrected. And actually, honestly, I know an auto EQ is meant to save you time. I could do manual EQs way quicker than an auto EQ, because I'm not having to set the parameters a set way. I'm not trying to fix the things that it's trying to overcorrect, and I'm only correcting the things that need corrected. So what I do is I get a frequency response normally on Squiglink itself. If it's like auditory and it's not on Squiglink, because unfortunately Squiglink doesn't do any auditory measurements, what you can do is you can go to the Auto GitHub repository. I'll leave a link in the description, and you can download a CSV file from like the whole collection that they've got. It's basically the Auto EQ database, and you can download any CSV file that's been on Auto EQ. So if it's auditory, you can find it, type it in, download it, and then you could upload the frequency response to SquigLink. You can also upload your own target, which is what me and Emrah do for his engineer target and a few other targets. And it gives you a choice, a myriad of different targets as well. And I like how you can add different measurements as well. So you could take one measurement from one person and add another measurement from another one and overlay them on top. SquigLink is just the best, in my opinion, and that's why I EQ headphones. But I'm also using Topping Tune as well, which is obviously manual, and it's kind of the same process, and it just works perfectly for topping. But yeah, I would not advise auto EQ for those who are starting out, because it's probably going to confuse you and you're not going to know how to set the parameters right. So just do it the SquigLink way, do it the manual way, and if you're struggling on how to EQ your headphones, you can consider joining the Discord. There is a whole section about how to EQ headphones using SquigLink. There's like over 238 paid members now, and the community is just growing, and they're so helpful. And if I'm not available or Emrah is not available, then again, there'll be somebody out there to lead you in the right direction, or like link you to a certain thread that we've done. And yeah, just do manual EQ, Emrah. I think I would be right in saying that. Auto EQ, no. Manual, SquigLink, probably the best way to try and EQ your headphones.
Yeah, it's not bad. But as a starting point, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, auto EQ is not perfect.
Yeah, it's not perfect, and it can sometimes mislead you and lead you astray, you know.
Yeah, and also we share our finding and presets and everything on Discord, so if they want to catch fish, they have to learn. If they want fish, they have to join
Discord, yeah.
In a Discord, yeah.
Correct, yeah. And now we've even got even further, where Emrah's got his own list of presets. I've got my own list of presets. So yeah, you've got different variations to try. And if you join the Discord, if you ask us to do an EQ for your headphone, we will make it and put it in our preset list as well. Obviously, if we can't test them, then we're having to go off the visuals. So normally what we do now is we then ask the person to tell us how it sounds like to them, if they can do a few mixes, and if they give us the thumbs up and they're like, yeah, translation's great, then again, we're happy to, to put that in as, tested or whatever. So other people that use it know it's a decent EQ. So yeah, there you go, Emrah. There is a lot of stuff we've hopefully debunked today, and hopefully we've set a few things right, and in the process educated people further about mixing on headphones. It's not as simple. It's not as simple as what people think it is. There is a lot of math and science and things that you need to learn and mistakes that you've got to make. But once you get all this stuff right, mixing on headphones is a breeze, and you'll wonder why you were struggling on speakers for so long.
Yeah, just send this video to people who talk shit. Bullshit.
Yeah, Emrah was at the point to me where he was like, no what, bro, fuck it. Like, we should just say to them, honestly, get all these YouTubers to send us mixes that they've done on headphones. Film them. We want them to film themselves mixing on headphones. We want sessions of them mixing on headphones to see how they mix and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, bro, it's fine. Chill. Right? The information is the most important. That's all we care about.
Yeah, if they trust their ears and stuff and the things they have, just and still think that we are saying some bullshit, just come to live stream. Let's see. Again, I invite them to the live stream. And
I'm not joking you. He is serious. He's done live streams on the Discord as well. I mean, what was it when you did the live stream? What headphone were you mixing on? Can you remember? Was it organic? I think it was organic. You did that one on.
No. It was the VSX.
Oh, it was a VSX, right?
Because I was going to send it to Steven. He is going to use that mix. He thinks it's fucking incredible, and he's going to use it on one of his upcoming videos as a reference.
Very, very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, the proof is in the pudding with that, man. And obviously I've got my own headphone mixes on my portfolio, which is on my website, taysimstudio.com. All of them have been mixed on headphones, and yeah, most of them are all accepted mixes as well. So yeah, it's just all about giving out good vibes and good information. So there you have it. Long one again, as always. But either way, it's what you need to do. So my name is Paul Third. That's Emrah Celik signing off, and we'll see you when we see you.
See you, everyone.